Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make lemon poppy seed scones. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers! Today's recipe is a fun springtimey twist on my favorite basic scone recipe. These scones are really simple to make, and just like with my traditional scone recipe, we're going to start by preheating our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, just like with my classic recipe, we're going to be using our food processor. Now, if you don't have a food processor, you can certainly make this using a pastry cutter or a grater. I'll include instructions for that in the recipe, but today I'll be using my food processor. Now we'll start by adding 2 cups of all-purpose flour to the basin. And we're going to add 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. If you're using unsalted butter, you would also add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Today I'm going to be using salted butter, so I'm going to skip that. But I am going to be adding 1 tablespoon of poppy seeds here. I will place the lid on our food processor and we'll just briefly pulse the ingredients together so that they're completely combined. Now, once your dry ingredients are combined, you're going to need your butter. This recipe uses 1 stick or 1/2 cup of butter. Again, I'm using salted butter, so I left the salt out. If you can get your hands on European butter, use it. It makes great tasting scones. Now, if you think of it, toss your butter in the freezer for about 15 minutes before you begin this recipe. The colder your butter, the better. Do not use room temperature or warm butter for this recipe. Now, I'm going to cut this butter into tablespoon-sized pieces and just scatter the pieces evenly over the dry ingredients in my food processor. Tablespoon-ish sized pieces. It does not have to be exact. We'll also be adding 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon zest to this recipe to get that great natural lemon flavor. Now, I'm usually able to get 1 1/2 tablespoons out of a single lemon. Now, when you're zesting this lemon, you do want to make sure that you don't go too deep. You want to just get the surface layer. If you go too far into the lemon and you get that white rind layer, that's actually called the lemon pith, and it will make your scones bitter. So you can see here with the lemon that I'm zesting here, I went right to that white layer, but I didn't zest through it. So once you've added your lemon, we are just going to pulse these ingredients together again until the mixture resembles coarse crumbs. You want to make sure that butter is nicely cut up into the flour mixture. You also don't want to overdo it because you don't want to make your butter too warm. Having that cold butter in there is key to those nice flaky scone layers. Let's take a look at this. Now the next ingredient you need is 1/2 cup of heavy cream, and you want this to be nice and cold as well. We're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract to that for a little bit of flavor, and then we'll just pour this over our dry ingredients. Now we'll just pulse everything together until the ingredients start to clump together. And I like to take my dough to this point where it's really starting to cling together. It hasn't clumped to form a solid ball yet, but it's starting to really cling together. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll transfer this to a clean surface. Now, I'm just going to use my hands to work this dough together into a ball. And then I'm going to fold this dough over itself several times. This is going to help encourage flaky layers. Rotate it. Fold it in half over itself, rotate it again, fold it over itself one more time, and now I'm going to form this into a disc that's about 6 inches in diameter. Now cut your disc of scone dough into 8 even wedges. I'm going to be using a sharp knife to do this, and when I cut the wedges, I'm going to be pressing straight down. This helps encourage the scones to rise straight up so that they don't look all wonky when they come out of the oven. I'm just going to transfer each wedge onto a parchment paper lined baking sheet. Now we'll take these over to our preheated oven where they will need to bake for about 15 to 17 minutes. And you'll want to let the scones cool completely on the baking sheet. So while the scones are cooling, let's make our lemon glaze. This is super simple to make. We're going to start with 1 1/4 cups of powdered sugar. Now you're also going to need about 1 1/2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You can use bottled lemon juice, but since we just zested that lemon, I'm going to squeeze out the juice from this lemon. And you can absolutely fish out the seeds if you'd like, but they're going to fall to the bottom, so they're not really going to be in your glaze, so it's not a big deal if you do or you don't. I'm also going to add 1.5 teaspoons of water. We may need a little bit more water. We'll see how the consistency looks. And I'll also add 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract for a little depth of flavor. So now you're just going to whisk everything together until it's nice and smooth. And the great thing about this glaze is it's pretty much impossible to mess up. If it's too thick, you can add a little bit more water to thin it out some. This is actually looking a little bit thin, so I'm going to whisk in a little bit more powdered sugar. If you actually measure your lemon juice instead of just squeezing it right into the bowl, you'll end up with the right consistency. My videographer, aka Zach, is giving me a really hard time about that right now. All right, so we're adding a little bit more powdered sugar because we want to have the right consistency and we also want to have the right taste. We don't want this glaze to be too tart. We don't want it to be too sweet. And right now, it looks like we finally have the right balance. So when you pull your whisk out of the icing, first of all, the glaze should be nice and smooth. And when you pull your whisk out, it should drizzle back in slowly. And the drip that falls back in should hold its shape for just about a second or so before it dissolves back into the frosting. So this finally looks good, so we can go ahead and dip our cooled scones. Now ideally, you would let your glaze set before you dig into your scones. It'll only take about 15 minutes, it sets pretty quickly, but I don't have that kind of patience, so I'm just gonna go ahead and dig in now. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe. If you try it out, please let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. I love the texture from the poppy seeds.